Marriage is only about love, or is it? Whenever the subject of same-sex marriage comes up, one often hears the following argument used to support legalizing same-sex marriage. Marriage is only about love, so everyone deserves to marry the one they love. But if you think about it, that statement begs the following questions. Why do they say that marriage is only about love? Are all marriages only about love? Has marriage always only ever been about love? And finally, should everyone who is in love be able to get married regardless of sex, age, relationship, or any other variable? So before jumping to any conclusions, let's ask three key questions. Firstly, what is the fundamental purpose of marriage? What is it for? Next, let's ask, if marriage is only about love, why should the government care? Why does the government make marriage laws in the first place? And last question, if marriage is only about love, why should it be limited to just two people? So firstly, what is marriage for? Well, your typical response is, well, marriage is only about love. But if it's only about love, isn't all love equally valid? Shouldn't all loving relationships be allowed to marry? So why can't a brother and sister marry if they're in love? Why can't we allow child marriage if they are in love and it's proven to be consensual? And why limit it to just two people? Why can't three or more people who love each other marry? And what about all the marriages around the world that are arranged, even in Australia? They work very well, even though there's no love involved initially. Many times they've never even met, but they learn to love each other. So I think you can see that it's just not that simple as saying that marriage is just about love. Our next question is, if marriage is only about love, why should the government care who you marry? Well, the typical response is, well, the government needs to make sure that everyone has the equal right to marry the one that they love. But if marriage is only about love, then why should the government get involved in the first place? I mean, many friendships involve a level of deep love and commitment. Does that mean that the government dictates who you can be friends with? And why spend taxpayers' money regulating a relationship that gives the government no direct benefit and that's just about satisfying the desires and feelings of the individuals involved? So again, it's not that simple. Just saying that marriage is only about love is not a good reason for governments to make marriage laws. And our last question is, what's so special about the number 2? If marriage is all about love, then why limit it to just two people? Now, as we consider this question, let's look at the B in LGBT. What about the bisexual? Isn't their love just as worthy of recognition as that between a same-sex couple? So why can't the bisexual marry? But hang on, aren't they born that way? So if they are going to be allowed to marry in line with their orientation, they need to be allowed to marry someone of either sex. So how can we limit them to marrying just one person? So again, we can see that it's just not that simple to say that marriage is just about love, and that's why marriage is only between two people. Most Australians would regard themselves as tolerant people, but tolerance means being willing to consider alternative points of view. Now, given that the answer marriage is only about love doesn't satisfactorily answer our key questions, let's consider some alternative answers to those questions that might make more sense. Firstly, the question of what is marriage for, what is the purpose of marriage, let's go back to basics. Every society that survives must have a steady supply of babies to replace those that die. Male-female sex is the most effective way to make these babies, and these babies need nearly 20 years of care from both mother and father to become productive members of society. Marriage is the institution created by society to keep mum and dad together to make sure that this happens. Every society in history has done this. Also, the social science research is unanimous. The best environment to raise kids is with married biological mother and father. Now, another way to put this is, babies come when men and women get together, good citizens come when men and women stay together, and marriage is the institution that makes sure that that happens. Now, even if we grant that love is generally a feature of most successful marriages, even in the arranged ones who learn to love each other, it's not the foundational purpose of marriage. The foundational purpose of marriage is not to validate emotions and desires. Its purpose is to regulate and create the raising of the next generation. Let's look at our second question. Why should the government care? Well, governments regulate marriage because, as a rule, children come from marriages, and governments need kids to become healthy, productive adults and taxpayers. This is best done by married biological parents. Governments make poor parents, and good evidence of this is how government costs balloon when marriages fail. Now, regardless of how much they love each other, same-sex couples cannot provide for governments or society what traditional male-female marriages can. Therefore, it's in government's best interest that male-female marriages succeed. That's the only reason for them to regulate marriage. Next, why two? Well, marriage is between two people because there are two sexes. A male and female is required to create a child in the first place. Same-sex couples by themselves, that is without external input, cannot procreate, so every same-sex couple will need input from someone of the opposite sex. Also, mothers and fathers bring unique benefits to raising children that same-sex couples simply cannot provide in and of themselves, regardless of how much they love the child. And as we saw, all equality research confirms that kids do best raised by two married biological parents. So in summary, we've looked at the following alternative answers to the key questions. Number one, across the world and across the ages, marriage has been about creating and raising kids. This is the purpose of marriage, not to validate emotions. Secondly, the only reason that government regulates marriage is because they want children to grow up as productive members of society. Male-female marriage is the best arrangement for this. And thirdly, marriage is between two people because there are two sexes that combine to create children. So we respectfully ask you to consider that the argument that marriage is only about love has failed to provide valid answers for the key questions asked. In contrast, valid answers have been provided that show that the purpose of marriage is not to validate love or emotions. The purpose of marriage is to create and raise the next generation. Now, in order to avoid bigotry, homophobia, or offence, logic, evidence, and simple common sense have been used to back up all of the arguments used. Now, no one wishes ill for same-sex couples, and no doubt they love each other as much as anyone else. Now, even though that love is a good thing, it doesn't explain why governments should change marriage laws, and it is not a good enough reason to support changing the entire institution of marriage for everybody to support same-sex marriage.